Hello, everyone. We are live, and I'm here today with most likely just a short stream. Um, I might have to jump off abruptly in an unknown amount of time. So we'll see how much we can get through. And as you can see in the description, I wanted to just come in today to address and explain some key points on a topic that's relevant to a lot of what we're discussing and maybe a recurring point of unclarity, a recurring question, which is what is the Brahman? How does the Brahman appear in the earliest Vedas, including the Rig Veda and also the Atharva Veda? And then seeing if we can bridge that into some key points about the Cailleach from Ireland that I've been thinking about recently. And so we'll see if we even get that far. But these things are all connected. So that's why it's so difficult to put it all in one simple video. There are so many sort of tangents and long strings of details you have to put together to get from one thing to the next, such as the absolute to the Irish Cailleach. And it's a fascinating journey to get there, but also there are points where it gets difficult. So I wanted to just kind of make a short video here and even just discuss with the audience and get feedback on these particular ideas and kind of fish for discussion, fish for back and forth with anyone who is out there. So to begin with, this is kind of the jumping off point for what I want to go into today, which is that we have the world pillar, the cosmic column, which is Axis Mundi in the Vedas, and it is one of the earliest and definitely the earliest very clear and explicit symbol of the Brahman that we have in the Vedas. And this is called the Skamba pillar. And so scholars recognize that the Brahman is not necessarily explicitly articulated in the Rig Veda, or at least the earliest layers of the Rig Veda. And that, it is a sort of an unknown, a sort of an open question, its status in that earliest layer of the Rig Veda. But they recognize that the Brahman appears articulated in the clearest terms for the first time in the Skamba hymn of the Atharva Veda, which is Atharva Veda 10.7. And we've gone through that in the Burning Bush live stream, actually, where I suggested that the Burning Bush is adapting from Puranic material regarding the linga of Shiva. So the linga of Shiva is this phallic representation of the fiery cosmic pillar, which is the absolute, and that seems to be downstream of the Skamba pillar that we see at least in the Atharva Veda in its clearest terms. So what's fascinating is that we have this word Skamba, which has a cognate in the same language, Sanskrit, of stamba. So you have stamba and skamba, which are sort of used interchangeably to refer to some kind of post or pillar, and specifically the cosmic pillar, which is the Brahman. In the Atharva Veda hymn, it is referred to as the mighty Brahmana. And that word there is Brahmanam in Sanskrit, Mahat, Brahmanam Mahat. And so it is being described as beyond existence and non-existence, beyond being and non-being, and having all the worlds within it, pouring the gold of the golden germ in the beginning, and just being beyond comprehension, um, and all these things in the Atharva Veda hymn. So it's very clear that it is this concept that we know as the Brahman in Vedic material. Um, and yeah, that becomes reiterated with the linga imagery later, and many other instances as well. What's fascinating is, yes, burning bush is Brahman equals Irminsul, so that seems very plausible and possible to me as well. So the Irminsul may be a version of this in Norse material, and that's a question we'll hopefully touch on. And so what's interesting here is that we have the word skamba or stamba. They're kind of two different words that are interchangeable and probably related to each other in Sanskrit. What's fascinating is that a cognate, which scholars even think is a borrowing from like Proto-Indo-Iranic or even earlier than Proto-Indo-Iranic, a borrowing that far back prior to 2000 BCE is how I understand it, at least, and we can look at this. But that this word, that the word such as stamba or skamba, was borrowed into Proto-Finnic and perhaps other languages in the area. I'm not sure the exact pathway, but it's found in Proto-Finnic as this word samas, also known as sampo, right? So you can see here from Proto-Finnic sambas, which means pillar or column, which is exactly what it means in Sanskrit, right? Probably an Indo-Iranic loan. And so I think Indo-Iranian, I think, yeah. So that's like an open question when exactly that happened. Maybe like Proto-Indo-Iranian or Indo-Iranian. There may have been some contact with those people, with the Proto-Finnic and the people in that region, leading to this word samas and sampo appearing in Finnish later, and in these languages, different versions. And so, yeah, it's fascinating. You can see right here that pillar, post, column, and that, yeah, you have it here. The meaning of it, as we find it in Finnic mythology, of course, is the sampo or samas found in the Finnic epic poems, the poetic material that they have that's put together in different ways. And it is this magical item of that can create different things. It is sort of mysterious, and it is connected to this concept of the mill, the magical mill that produces these multiple different things that can kind of produce on command. So in that sense, it could be an image of a magical all-producing thing, such as a mill, or some kind, or however it's presented in different places. But it has this root word actually pointing to cosmic pillar. So it has that meaning still in it, and then it connects to this magical mill. So it seems to be similar to this cosmic pillar of the Vedas that once again, that this cosmic pillar that is the absolute produces all the things, all the worlds, in, for example, the Atharva Veda hymn. So with that in mind, the question is, if this is borrowed from the Indo-Iranic layer, and let me see if I can pull up one piece of evidence for this. So let me find something real quick. Oops. Okay, so sharing. This is some information on, if I can find this. This is information on, this is from a scholarly work called Indo-Iranian Borrowings in Uralic Critical Overview of the Sound Substitutions and Distribution Criteria, right? And it explains that Finnish samas, meaning pillar, also sampo, the mill of abundance, and then samas, and Estonian samas, sambas, all these different versions of the word, right? It appears multiple places, and then it's probably from pre-Finnic sampas, reconstructed, and that seems to be from Proto-Indo-Iranic, right? See, stambas, and then Proto-Indo-Iranic stambas, meaning pillar. So this is all the scholarly, citation there. And it says, this Indo-Iranian etymology is probably correct. Semantically, the Indo-Iranian original is very close to the Finnic word, and there are no phonological problems either. The sound substitution S to ST has convincing parallels in Germanic and Baltic loans in Finnic. However, the numerous derivations and words whose connection to samas is etymologically unclear make the etymology more complicated. Also, a Baltic etymology from the reflex of the same Indo-European word has been proposed by Newtonen, who assumes that Proto-Baltic stamba is the source of the Finnic word. From the point of view of phonology, both are equally likely. Newtonen's idea has been supported by Cailleach. The Baltic cognate's meaning suits the Finnic word less well, but Cailleach has argued that the word could have been acquired from a stage of Baltic where the more archaic meaning of pillar would have still been retained if the original meaning of the Indo-European verbal root was to support, to bind, which is the meaning of the Indic verb. It is possible that the Baltic word also originally had a meaning akin to pillar, and that stem is indeed a later development as suggested. However, LIV2 gives a more abstract meaning. Quote, fix support for the Indo-European verbal root, and in the light of this semantic reconstruction, it seems unnecessary to argue that a meaning pillar would have to be primary for the Baltic noun stambas. LIV2 mentions that the root steb is not easily distinguished from stemb, and a Baltic verbal forms like Lithuanian stembu, etc., rather than stem. Okay, you can, this can be looked up in more detail, of course. Later, Cailleach mentioned samas among the Indo-Iranian etymologies, but he does not discuss the etymology in further detail. Parpola has supported the Indo-Iranian etymology. Both etymologies are formally faultless, but there is no reason to reject the Indo-Iranian etymology in favor of the Baltic one. There are many Indo-Iranian borrowings connected to mythology found in Western Uralic languages. See Yuma and Tajwas, and of course Yuma is interestingly very pertinent to emir, to the root word for emir that we have looked at before. Seems to be directly, more or less directly cognate to Latvian Umis. So I'm wondering if Yuma is related to Umis, I guess, actually. I don't actually know that for sure. But nonetheless, we have in Latvian Umis, and then we have here Yuma. And it can be assumed that Sampas belongs to the same layer of borrowings. At the time when the Baltic option was suggested, there was not yet many Indo-Iranian borrowings known from Finnic only, and this was seen as support for the Baltic etymology of the word. But since then, especially thanks to the works of Cailleach, it has been clear that there are a number of borrowings found in Finnic only. It is thus no obstacle to consider this an Indo-Iranian loanword. The syllable as is attested in a number of borrowings, which are usually found in only a couple of westernly branches. It is possible that as stems were not yet possible in Proto-Uralic, although the apocope in most eastern branches makes it more difficult to determine this. The same ending is also attested in some Balto-Slavic and many Baltic borrowings. See porkas. It is possible that the loans with as are later, perhaps Iranian loans borrowed before the S to H change took place in Iranian. The root stem has reflexes in Iranian branch. As you can see, strong, solid, strong, big. But a noun corresponding to OI, stamba, is not attested in any Iranian language. The Finnic word has also been derived from other Indo-Iranian words, which I find much more unconvincing. Skamba, so it's seemingly derived more from stemb, which is related to the word stamba instead of skamba. So it's this slight issue between these two cognate words in the language that I mentioned before. But nonetheless, we see the words connected to stamba used interchangeably with skamba. For example, even connected to Shiva when he's taking sort of the role of the cosmic pillar and that sort of thing. This explanation is also mentioned by EY. The substitution S to from SK is not very likely, as there are no parallel examples to this, and the traditional etymology is clearly better. Uotila has derived the Finnic word from Proto-Indo-Iranian samba. This would phonetically be an equally fitting etymology, but the word does not have a solid Indo-Iranian etymology. So it's also possible that the noun is derived from Indo-Iranian root sam. The formation samba is attested only in Indo-Aryan. Samba and samya. There is no compelling reason to reject the earlier etymology, but Uotila's idea remains possible too. Various other Finnic words have been connected etymologically with sampas in earlier research. The words for frog, samako, zamba, and their possible but irregular Sami cognates, such as kuobo, have been connected here by setala, and this possibility is also mentioned. But it is probable that these two words have nothing to do with the Proto-Finnic sampas. Okay, so Uotila lists parallel examples from other European languages where the name of this fish denotes mythologically important creature. And so we have an Indo-Iranian etymology is also possible for the Sami word being discussed here, but there is no compelling reason to assume that this word is borrowed specifically from Indo-Iranian. Okay, so a long discussion there, showing the diversity of opinions on this borrowing, but reiterating throughout that there is no good reason to reject the Indo-Iranic or Proto-Indo-Iranic etymology of samas, and that early on there was less evidence for this type of borrowing, and then over time there's become more evidence for similar types of borrowings as this, and therefore we have, it seems to be more or less a consensus that this is the most likely case for what happened, and you have it here in Wiktionary. That's why it appears as etymology 1 for samas in Wiktionary. Probably an Indo-Iranian loan and cognate of Sanskrit stamba. Okay, so what's fascinating here is, well, a lot of things, but the sampo or the samas, it appears as this centrally important item in Finnish mythology. And of course, Finnish mythology isn't technically or fully or directly Indo-European, but we can see here bleed over. We can see direct borrowings if this is the case, and so there could be more influence, or at least more overlap and just similarity from the beginning. More mutual understanding, similar myth types, and then as well as borrowings, reinforcing that in the Finnish material. And so this becomes fascinating for multiple reasons, like I said. One of them being if the sampo was borrowed as a word and also with conceptual meanings attached to it in the Indo-Iranic or Proto-Indo-Iranic time period. This is like pre 1800 BCE or pre 2000 BCE, even when there may have been these contexts. And so this, either way, this would have been prior to the Indo-Aryans and the um, Proto-Iranics, or the Iranics, breaking apart, going their separate ways, and becoming the later Iranics and Persians, Avestans, and then the other branch, the Indo-Aryans, of course, becoming the Vedics in this sort of theory, at least. And so that means either way, this borrowing happened well before the Rig Veda was composed at all, well before the earliest layers of the Rig Veda. So the Sampas and the Sampo and the Samas can be mythological items to look at that may suggest something downstream of this pre-Rig Vedic concept attached to the cosmic pillar item, the magical cosmic pillar, the Stamba or Skamba pillar. So that can be you can place that in your chronological branching picture, your map that you have in your mind, of this coming downstream of not the Proto-Indo-Europeans or anything, but a very early pre-breaking apart of the future Rigvedics and the future Avestans. So this would have been upstream of the Rig Veda and the Avesta. This at least the original concept of the this pillar that became the Samas and Sampo. So it is one tack, one point on our map that you can kind of pin there and put into relation with other pieces of data to deduce what they might have been thinking in this pre-Proto-Indo-Iranian time period, and what concepts were already current then, and then put that into comparison with European similar concepts and that sort of thing. So to move that forward a bit more, we can then look at the key information from the Rig Veda itself. So like I said, we do have the Atharva Veda. So I'll just pull that up first for anyone interested, just because this is the other key detail, key point on the map to correlate things between. But like I said, it is 10.7 of the Atharva Veda. It's this very crucial hymn. And one moment. So yeah, Skamba, the pillar or fulcrum of all existence. We can see here the entire hymn is composed of these mystical questions, right? This is the register that the poets of the Vedas slip into when they are addressing the mystical concepts and deities or what have you that are beyond comprehension. This repeated questioning puts that across, that this is it is beyond the poets knowing. What is this? Which of your members are the seat of fervor? Where in the Skamba stands faith, holy duty, truth? Which of his members is the earth's upholder, which gives the middle air a base to rest on? So yeah, you will see this in the Vedas. This is not how all the Vedic hymns are. They are not all made out of these mystical questions. So when you see the mystical questioning register used, it often tells you that it is addressing something like the absolute. So this is an important thing to understand. because we'll see it in some other key places. So it is also emphasized, of course, in this hymn that the sky and the sun and the moon and everything is all within, being supported by this skamba pillar. The past and the future are being penetrated by this pillar. And then, law and belief, all these abstract concepts, all the elements, and then most importantly, perhaps, existence and non-existence as well. So we have, let's see if I can find this passage. We have Skamba pouring the gold that is Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic egg. Okay, here. Who out of many, tell me, is that Skamba in whom men recognize the waters, Brahma, in whom they know the worlds and their enclosures, in whom are non-existence and existence. So, this just very clearly shows that the Skamba is encompassing everything that is thinkable. It is encompassing and upholding even non-existence and existence. It's so far beyond comprehension. It just is the absolute. And so that is kind of the definition of the absolute. Does it transcend even the duality of non-existence and existence, which is reiterated in symbolism of the waters versus Brahma? That's kind of the visible manifestation of that dualism, the waters symbolizing sort of the non-existent state, and Brahma symbolizing the coherent totality of being, which is embodied in him as a god, the god who is the totality of being. Okay, so that's the basic concept. That is in the Atharva Veda, which can be dated to about 1000 BC usually, I think, and there are scholarly debates about that. But it is also understood that the cosmological hymns of the Atharva Veda, such as this one, seem to be from the same rishis, or some of the same rishis and their families, who were composing the final mandala, the final book 10 of the Rig Veda. So this is, I was just watching a video on YouTube with Stephanie Jameson. She's, the translator of the Rig Veda of recent years. And I believe Michael Witzel also reiterates this in some of his articles. But in any case, there is this concept that the Rig Vedic poets actually contributed to what became collected in the Atharva Veda. And so there's a continuity of the cosmological hymns. So anyways, we shouldn't picture a huge gap between the Rig Veda and the Atharva Veda. There's, questions about how ancient, how deep are some of the Atharva Veda hymns. They were collected or what have you, canonized, composed in their forms around 1000 BC, but the roots, how far back they go, is also always an unknown. So what then becomes the big question is, we have this pin in pre 1800 BCE, around 2000 BC or what have you, of a pillar concept connected to stamba being borrowed into Uralic languages such as Finnish or Proto-Finnish, and in that tradition, it becomes treated as this, all creating item that is portrayed like a mill of sorts. It is like a magical, all-purpose mill, which all the gods, all the divine heroes are fighting over. And so, and so if you kind of conceptualize, this concept appearing in 1000 BC in the Atharva Veda, and then also tracing to in the Finnic borrowing back prior to 1800 or 2000 BC, on the other side, it leaves this question open of the Rig Veda. Was there a continuity then in the Rig Veda of of a concept like this underlying even the earliest Rig Vedic worldview and material? And so I will go into why we should think that there indeed was this sort of thing, because it actually appears in the Rig Veda just kind of um, being mentioned cryptically, or in a way that you could miss it if you're not attuned or looking for it, knowing where to look. So yeah, with that, let me just get my next bit of information here. So, okay. So first of all, Rig Veda 3.55. Okay. So if you go to Rig Veda 3.55, and this is the Griffith translation. I'll also read the Jameson translation. But in verse 1, we have, "At the first shining of the earliest mornings in the cow's home was born the great eternal. Now shall the statutes of the gods be valid. Great is the gods' supreme and sole dominion. Let not the gods here injure us, O Agni, uh, nor the fathers of old time who know the region, nor the sign set between the two ancient dwellings. Great is the God's supreme and sole dominion." Okay, so in the Jameson and Brereton version, we have one moment. Okay, it is, "Then when the ancient dawns dawned forth in the track of the cow, a great imperishable syllable was born, or was discerned, which tends to the commandments of the gods. Great is the one and only lordship of the gods." Unquote. And so this is crucial because this is from Book 3 of the Rig Veda, which is agreed to be uh, in the earliest layer of the Rig Veda. So the family books being books 2 through 7, and Book 3 being, one of those of the earliest chunk of the Rig Veda. So right here in the earliest layer, we have a reference to what Jameson and Brereton are translating as the great imperishable syllable. And that is because the word used here for the great imperishable, or as Griffith translates it, the great eternal, right? It's the same word. The word here is aksharam. And aksharam comes to be understood in other later parts of the Vedic tradition as just another word meaning the word Om, and the word Om being the syllable that is the absolute, the syllable that is Brahman. So right here in the earliest layer, we have mentioned Aksharam. We just don't have Brahman mentioned. We don't have Om mentioned by name, but we have the other word that's interchangeable with it. And we have it being treated um, as, in this mystical moment, this very mystical moment in the earliest mornings or the ancient dawns, this earliest time in the track of the cow. And the cow here is interpreted uh, as being Aditi. So the cow who is there in the earliest dawns is the goddess Aditi, who also appears in the Rig Veda. And her name means unbound or boundless. There are different ways to translate her name, which in itself is a bit mystical and complicated. But if the image is that in the track of the boundless, of the goddess who is the boundless, the track of this cow, a great imperishable syllable, which is synonymous with Aum, was born or discerned, and this somehow tends to the great commandments of the gods and the great lordship, one and only lordship of the gods. So throughout this hymn, it is emphasized that the lordship of the gods is one and only, with the word ekam. Ekam, of course, being also the name of that one who appears out of the waters in the famous creation hymn of Book 10, Tad Ekam, means that one. So Ekam refers to sort of the absoluteness, the totality that emerges like as the cosmic germ or cosmic egg in that creation hymn, the unity of the divine. This word Ekam itself is also mystical in that sense in the Rig Veda. So it's a very mystical passage. What it does is it shows there is an intense mysticalness in the earliest layer of the Rig Veda, using a synonym of the Brahman, using a synonym of the Aum, quite literally, directly describing something in the track of the unbounded. There is this imperishable thing, which is the imperishable syllable. So, first of all, the concept of imperishableness, or as Griffith translates it, eternality, that in itself is already a mystical concept. Eternality and imperishableness can only apply to something that is beyond the perishable. Okay, it is a mystical idea, a metaphysical idea in the first place, and it is being attached to this word that refers to the great syllable. So why is there this great syllable that is imperishable in the track of the unbounded? Okay, so all of that should point to a very strong possibility that this is, referring to the Aum. Before they just didn't directly say the word Aum. They said the great imperishable syllable. They didn't directly say Brahman, but here it is. It seems to be referring to something that is an absolute or like an absolute. And it is, either way you look at it, it is intensely mystical. You can bring that into a combination with Agni's mystical treatment in some of the same sections in the earliest books of the Rig Veda, such as Rig Veda 5.3. We have Agni described as becoming all of the gods, and all of the gods being in Agni. And so this is, again, a concept of that the gods are not, absolutely separate. That Agni actually encompasses them in a sort of one and only lordship of the gods, as described in this previous hymn. Agni kind of encompasses that, and that's another reason why that golden germ Hiranyagarbha is also identified as Agni. It is both Brahma, and it's Brahma and Agni, it's Brahma / Agni in a sense. So in 5.3 we have, quote, "Thou, O Agni, art Varuna when thou art born. Thou becomest Mitra when thou art perfectly kindled. In thee are all the gods, O son of force. Thou art Indra in the mortal who gives the sacrifice," etc. And unquote. So it's impossible to really explain how one god can become another without accepting that they do not have rigid boundaries in a simple sense at this level of the Rig Veda. The only way to explain this away is to try to rationalize what is clearly a mystical vision of the gods. Yeah, and so we have this is the earliest layer of the Rig Veda. We have Agni being treated as encompassing all of the gods and becoming all the gods. We have the imperishable syllable, um, which is in the track of the boundless. Okay, it's really hard to just say these aren't possible pieces of evidence pointing towards the Brahman concept already being there in some regard. Now, the next piece that is key to look at is Rig Veda 4.14 and Rig Veda 4.13. And let me just pull those up real quick. Okay, so Rig Veda 4.13. Oh, wait, one moment, please. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. So I just had a phone call to take, and so we have Rig Veda 4.13 here. You can take a look. I'm going to get I really want to pull up the Jameson and Brereton versions of these, which I recommend looking at. Sometimes Griffith doesn't capture the nuances as well, I think, even though I like his translation. It's nice and it's poetic. But we have here, so a hymn to Agni, and in the final verses, it says it is addressing Agni and addressing the sun. So, of course, this Agni becomes the sun, so there's a continuity of these concepts as well. Agni as this encompassing god of all the gods who also becomes the sun. And then the poet turns to this questioning mode once again that we also saw in the Skamba hymn, right? If you recall, is question mark after question mark, because that is the mode that the poet switches to when addressing things such as the absolute. We also see that actually in the Nasadiya Sukta. So let's just pull that up as well. We can see in the Nasadiya Sukta this questioning mode. Transversely was their severing line extended. What was above it then, and what below it? Who verily knows, and who can here declare it? Whence it was born, and whence comes this creation? The gods are later than this world's production. Who knows then whence it first came into being? He, the first origin of this creation, whether he formed it all or did not form it. Whose eye controls this world in highest heaven? He verily knows it, or perhaps he knows it not. So you can see it is the same questioning, this mystical questioning mode that we saw all throughout the Skamba hymn, which doesn't pop up until the sages, the poets, are confronted with these mystical issues that they can't fully comprehend, right? So um, we then just happen to see that again in this 4.13 that I was mentioning. And this 4.13, again, it's in the earliest layer of the Rig Veda in the family books. And if you look at the last verse, verse 5, it's addressing the sun. And so Jameson and Brereton have a superior translation of this, and so I'll read from there. It says, quote, "Not held firm, not tied down. How does this one," and or the poet is talking about the sun, "how does this one, the sun, not fall down head over heels? With what autonomous power does he journey? Who has seen it? As prop of heaven, utterly fixed, he protects the vault." And so what Jameson Brereton's translation obscure there is that the word for prop is actually skamba. And you can see in the Griffith translation, he describes it as pillar. So it's an interchangeable definition, prop or pillar. The skamba is the prop of heaven, the fulcrum of existence. Fulcrum is another translation of the skamba. But it quite literally says, the skamba of heaven. Not only does it say that this is a pillar, a skamba or a prop, but it's quite literally skamba of heaven, a very mystical formulation, in my opinion. So we have it there, a close-up pillar, and it's within this mystical questioning mode, once again, that just happens to be exactly what the poet turns on in the Atharva Veda hymn when discussing the skamba. Okay, so I want to suggest that what is happening here is that the skamba of heaven is being used as a symbol of the Brahman by the poet in a very self-conscious way. They know that skamba of heaven is a mystical formulae, and that they know that the mystical questioning mode, who has seen this, what power moves this, that is all connected to the skamba understood as a Brahman, as an absolute concept. Furthermore, what is happening in this hymn is that the poet is asking, what is the power that holds up the sun itself in the sky? How is there this autonomous power within the sun that keeps it from tumbling headfirst as it kind of goes up and also down in its downward path to the earth? It's like there's a pillar of heaven, a skamba of heaven, undergirding and holding up and giving this power to even the sun. The sun, which is Surya, which is Agni, is this incredible god to them. But even within that, they are perceiving and drawing out this mystical power that is autonomous somehow, and also immovable, utterly fixed. So this is how Jameson and Brereton describe it. The skamba of heaven, utterly fixed. So utter fixity is also something that we see that comes up in other places related to the Brahman and the skamba. So just like imperishableness and eternality only makes sense in a metaphysical concept of something transcending the world of change and time, right? Complete motionlessness, utter fixity, that is an autonomous power of utter fixity, is also in itself a mystical concept, because what can there be that is completely fixed, that does not move, that means that does not change, that is therefore imperishable? I think it is more or less, this is a confusing mystical passage, but it is also in a way explaining itself. I don't know if self-evident is going too far, probably, but it has all the marks that we see in the skamba hymn of the Atharva Veda later. the mystical questioning, the emphasis on the utter fixity, and it is underpinning even this high god, the god of the sun, who is also the fire god. Okay, we also see essentially these same lines appear in was it 4.14, so 4.13 and 4.14. So it is a variation of these same lines. How is it that unbound and unsupported he the sun falleth, not although directed downward? By what self-power moves he? Who hath seen it? He guards the vault of heaven, a close set skamba, pillar. So we can also pull up, let's see, we can pull up the exact Sanskrit there too, which would be nice. Okay, so this is the Wilson translation. It's not as good of a translation, but this is a nice website. It's from like 1840 or something like that, this translation, but it gives some more information with the Sanskrit. So this sun, not far removed and unobstructed, whether looking downward or looking upward, is harmed by no one. What is the power by which he travels? Who has truly beheld him? Who, as the collective pillar of heaven, sustains the sky? So clearly that last line is directed to the skamba itself. Who has beheld him? That's exactly how the skamba in the Atharva Veda, which is more clearly the Brahman, is addressed. So if we go down here, we can see that the words used are Diva Skamba. And so this is, translated by Wilson as collective pillar of heaven, which is sustaining the sky and giving the sun its power, its autonomous power to fly through the sky and not fall. So pillar of heaven, skamba of heaven, Jameson and Brereton translate as prop of heaven, but it is these words. Those are just English translations. What you actually have in the Sanskrit is the word skamba itself, paired with diva, meaning heaven. So it's very clear that you have this compound name, such as, which can translate as pillar of heaven or skamba of heaven. Okay, I want to get that across. And then we have this also in Book 9 of the Rig Veda as well. And what's interesting there is that, let's see, 9.86.46. I'll pull this up. 9.86.46. Loosed is the heavens support. And so that word support is skamba. Loosed is the skamba of heaven, the heavens skamba. The uplifted cheering juice, the triply mingled draught flows round into the worlds. The holy hymns caress the stalks that claim our praise, etc., etc. And if I can figure out how to get Jameson and Brereton open once more, we can see that it is again skamba of heaven in a different wording is used here to describe the power within the soma itself. And soma here is simultaneously the juice, the cheering juice, clearly, and also the god of the moon god. And so somehow, when you put these side by side, Book 9 is a bit later than Book 4, but it is also not in the latest layer, which is Book 1 and 10, more or less. The Soma, this is the Soma Mandala of Book 9, where it is sort of like a compilation of lots of hymns to Soma. So, it's considered a bit later, but it is also like a compilation, so it could have like earlier material clearly as well. In any case, it's the mid to late layer of the Rig Veda. But between these cases, we have the two mentions of the skamba of heaven as the power undergirding and within the sun itself, and the sun god, in book 4, the earliest layer. Then we have again the skamba of heaven as this power within the soma juice itself. And of course, the soma juice is this divine substance that takes you above and beyond into the realm of the divine. And it is, it's an incredibly high level divine substance. Okay. So it is, and even within and giving that substance, that God, soma, its power, is once again the skamba of heaven. Let's see what Jameson and Brereton translate this as. Right, prop of heaven, once again, they like to translate it as prop of heaven, but this underplays the fact that the word itself in the original language is skamba. So prop is just one translation, such as fulcrum. And they say, quote, "It has been sent surging, the prop, skamba, of heaven, the exhilarating drink held aloft. It rushes threefold around the worlds," unquote. So in any case, what's fascinating to me is that the skamba of heaven, it's not only the power of the sun or something, it is also the power of the moon / sacred liquid. So it is not reducible to either the sun or the sacred liquid / moon. It is undergirding both of them. Therefore, it is already, in a way, beneath, even these powerful gods. It is at a higher level in terms of being what provides them strength, what gives them this utterly fixed autonomous power, right? So it just can't be boiled down to simply a pillar that it also upholds the sky, but it can't be boiled down to just being like a mundane pillar that holds the sky. It also gives the power of the sun. It also gives the power of the sacred liquid and the moon. When you bring that all together, it once again is hard not to see that as already being the concept of the absolute, in my opinion, because again, it has this mystical questioning mode that is reserved for concepts like the skamba, like the absolute that we see elsewhere. They use it in these passing mentions. They use it with a formulaic compound name, which is Diva Skamba, as we saw, and skamba of heaven. And it is common to both sun and sacred liquid / moon, but not reducible to them. Okay, so when you put that side by side with, of course, them having this concept of the imperishable syllable in the earliest layer of the Rig Veda, you put that side by side with how Agni is treated. It's just this is what it would look like if the absolute existed. The Brahman already existed in the early Rigvedic period, but kind of in the background, and the poets kind of used it as the groundwork from which they made hymns to the individual gods, they not needing to refer to it over and over again in an explicit way and explain it to anyone because it's just their common understanding. It's what it would look like if sort of the absolute was, just this background, this backdrop from which they had a mystical understanding of things, but not needing to be named over and over again or named explicitly as the Brahman at all, really. But yeah, when you put these pieces in place, combined with how when the Brahman gets first fully articulated in the Atharva Veda, it's this fully formed concept that they can explain at length over and over again with the name Skamba. It seems like this is just drawing from a deeper tradition that was already there in the Rig Veda. When you connect that to the fact that the Sampo and the Samas words seem to have been borrowed in Proto-Indo-Iranic times, and then that concept gets treated as this all-producing mill object while retaining the etymology connected to pillar, that sort of completes a chronological timeline connecting the Proto-Indo-Iranic period through the Rig Vedic to the Atharva Veda, in my opinion. So hopefully, yeah, that's about as clear as I can make it, at least. Those are the key references that everyone should look at and understand. These verses, these hymns of the Rig Veda, they show that there was some kind of mystical concept, which is hard. It's extremely hard to coherently explain as something other than, an absolute or very, circling that sort of concept already. Okay. Um, so yeah, I would like to see anyone try to explain what I've laid out as not being the absolute. We're working with mystical material that is open to interpretation 100%. But these things like imperishableness or eternality, utter fixity, autonomous power, being beyond and undergirding both the power of sun and sacred liquid / moon, all of these things, and then having these imperishable syllable that can only make sense kind of in context of what the tradition tells us it is, and being found in the footprint of the unbound, of the boundless, in the earliest dawn. Like, what else does this mean? What else can this actually mean? So this is why it's fascinating that we have the samas of the Finnish material. What we then can look at, I'm not sure if I'll have a chance today. I'm running out of time, as you guys can probably imagine. But I would like to show how the Samas then has an intimate connection with the goddess Lauhi, and that Lauhi is this goddess of winter, and certain things like connected to winter and the cold. She gives birth to the cold, the frost rather, that brings the winter. But she's the keeper of this Samas. So she's treated as this antagonist of the Finnish epic, right? So let's see if I can move things to the next step here. But yes, so let's just look at Lauhi. Right. So in the Kalevala, Lauhi is this goddess of, she's mother of wolves, which is fascinating. Ruler of perhaps the underworld. Yeah, she becomes the owner of the Sampo in this version, and the Sampo is then sought after by the other divine heroes. And what's interesting is she has a daughter who is like the daughter of the let's see, the maiden of the rainbow, and she is weaving. And yeah, let's see, it connects to this complex of weaving, of a sort of weaving figure. So, okay, here we go. This is worth looking at. Sikala called Lauhi a neighbor of death, the personification of cold, and a sender of frost, the birther of demons and beasts, and the first shaman or witch. Okay, gives birth to wolves. She births wolves and frost. So what I want to suggest is that these are concepts that we also find with hag goddesses, such as the Cailleach. But also we find similar things even with Frau Halla and the connected goddesses to her. And so there could be actually a continuity in these figures. And Lauhi clearly is portrayed as fearful and in a sort of negative way in some senses, but she is in the epic. She's also complex, and it seems like just as much as you could theorize the Cailleach being, ambivalent. She brings the Cailleach brings winter. She either with her staff or her cloak in different stories. She will bring the snow of winter. She'll shake her cloak out over the land and bring the frost, essentially bring the snow. Or she'll strike the earth with her staff and turn it, make it frozen or turn it to stone, things like that. And that is similar to what we see with Lauhi. So you can see how Lauhi could be a more ambivalent figure who could have been a complex goddess originally, even though she has this angry witch side. The same thing can be said of Cailleach, of the Cailleach, and even of Frau Halla. Of course, Frau Halla can appear as a terrifying figure, terrifying hag, just like the Cailleach can. The dark grandmother, as Frau Halla is called. And what's interesting is that even Frau Halla brings the snow. It's this same, seemingly the same mytheme, where there is one story type where Frau Halla, where the snow is believed to be Frau Halla shaking out her bedding, and so like the feathers from her feather bedding falling to earth is the snow. So it's very coincidental, since it is the hag goddess, the Cailleach, who does similar, shaking out her cloak to make the snow. And then we have Lauhi birthing the frost as well as the wolves. And then we have Lauhi as the mother of the Maiden of the Rainbow. So here we go. The Maiden of the Rainbow. Just take a look here. So Pohjola is, I think that's the land of Lauhi, so she gets called Pohjola as far as I understand, because she's the queen of Pohjola. Someone can correct me if that's wrong, but this Pohjola appears to be interchangeable with Lauhi. Pohjola's fair and winsome daughter, glory of the land and water, sat upon the bow of heaven on its highest arch, resplendent, in a gown of richest fabric, in a gold and silver air gown, weaving webs of golden texture, interlacing threads of silver, weaving with a golden shuttle, with a weaving comb of silver, merrily flies the golden shuttle. From the maiden's nimble fingers briskly swings the lathe in weaving, swiftly flies the comb of silver from the skyborn maiden's fingers, weaving webs of wondrous beauty. And then beauteous on the bow, the maiden sitting, beauteous maiden of the rainbow, glory of the earth and ocean, weaving there a golden fabric, working with the rustling silver. Okay, so we have Lauhi / Pohjola the god, this goddess type hag figure, who is the keeper here. She's keeping the sampo away to herself. This magical mill that has the etymology seeming to be borrowed from this skamba, right? And she has a daughter there with her, sitting on the rainbow on its highest peak, and weaving a golden fabric, and this sort of thing. Uh, I'll show you something interesting here to go along with this. So back to Atharva Veda 10.7. At the conclusion of this hymn, we have this. So this entire hymn is about the pillar, the skamba of heaven, with all that is within it, all existence and non-existence. And then we have, he verily knows the reed of gold that stands amid the flood is the mysterious Lord of life. So the reed of gold is like another image of a golden pillar within the world that is like within the waters. It's like another a mystical image. The reed, it's like an outward representation of the pillar, this reed of gold, or perhaps it is within the cosmos. It manifests as like a reed of gold. It's sort of a world tree image almost, because it is now like pictured as like a plant, a reed of gold, standing amid the flood, amid the waters. And then it has singly the two young maids of different colors approach the six-pegged warp in turns and weave it. The one draws out the threads, the other lays them, they break them not, they reach no end of labor. Of these two dancing round as 'twere, I cannot distinguish whether ranks before the other. And then a male inweaves this web, a male divides it, a male hath stretched it to the cope of heaven. These pegs have buttressed up the sky. The samans, that is, the saman, let's see, that is the melodies, the saman melodies, have turned them into shuttles for the weaving. So we have a scene of weaving right at the conclusion of the skamba hymn. And it is two maidens trading off weaving, sitting there on the skamba, seemingly. There's like a warp coming from this pillar, and there they are, reaching no end in labor. The pegs themselves are buttressing up the sky. So it's clearly all part of this skamba with two maidens weaving and never ending. It seems to be, first of all, it can be connected to the fate goddesses who weave, of course, although there's only two instead of three. It very easily can be a connected concept or the same concept. But it seems in this poem, which is continued in the next hymn, actually, the next hymn continues this same theme, the same story, the same hymn, essentially. And it seems to be that the maidens are possibly night and day. So it's like night and day are weaving time, weaving existence, trading off. There are two different colors, night and day. And so they are sitting there weaving. So what's fascinating is that you have this world pillar, and from it, two maidens are there weaving upon it. In the Finnish hymn, of course, you have Lauhi, who at this time is the keeper of the sampo, which is derived from the same concept, the same word root, the same root word rather, of stamba. And there with Lauhi on the peak of the rainbow, very similar positioning, you have the maiden of the rainbow, who is once again weaving. So there's a maiden weaving tied closely to the keeper of the sampo, of the whatever concept is connected to this root word in both cases, the sampo versus the skamba. So that in itself is interesting. And then if you go into the next hymn, which is hymn 8, 10.8, it goes, it's very mystical and confusing, but it goes more into the skamba. With half, it hath begotten all creation. So it's a creator of all, of course, right? Wearing all forms, that entity upholds the earth. The infinite to every side extended, the infinite and the finite and the infinite all around us. These twain heavens Lord divides as he advances, knowing the past and all the future. Within the womb Prajapati is moving. He, though unseen, is born in sundry places. He with one half engendered all creation. What sign is there to tell us of the other? And then we have a description of day and night once again. Him too they call eternal. He may become new again today. Day and night reproduce themselves, each from the form the other wears. 100,000, yea, 100 million stores of wealth are laid in him. Hence the deity who grasps with firmer hold is dear to me. Okay. Then it says, this fair one is untouched by age, immortal in a mortal's house. He for whom she was made lies low, and he who formed her hath grown old. Thou art a woman and a man, thou art a damsel and a boy. Okay, this is just, soul God dwelling in the mind. It's this mystical concept of the God who is within everything, right? The absolute, which gives birth to itself in everything in a sense. Okay, then we have the mighty goddess of the morn. Or rather, it starts here. Brought forth in olden time, the everlasting, high over all that was she, the ancient. So ancient, of course, means old. So it is a goddess who is being described first and foremost as the old one. The old ones. It's similar to a hag concept, at least theoretically. Okay, so the old goddess, the ancient. You can consider that possibility. The mighty goddess of the morn. Okay, so this is more so describing Ushas, the dawn goddess. So that's interesting. The mighty goddess of the morn, refulgent with one eye, looketh round with one that winketh. Known by the name of guardian grace, the deity sits girt by right. The trees have taken from her hue, green garlanded their robe of green. When he is near, she leaves him not. She sees him not, though he is near. Behold the wisdom of the god. He hath not died, he grows not old. Voices that never were before emitted speak as fitteth them. Whither they go and speak, they say, there is the mighty Brahmana. So that is the skamba, which is called the mighty Brahmana, aka the Brahman. I ask thee where the water's flower by wondrous magic art was placed. Thereon the gods and men are set as spokes are fastened in the nave. Okay, let's see if there's more on the goddess, but okay, I think that was the key part. So we have this goddess of the morn mentioned, right? Connected to, and she's described as this ancient goddess of the morn with one eye looking around, and with one eye closed, seemingly winketh. All right, it's very confusing. This is why I'd like to put this out for discussion of how this connects, because we have in the hymn before, we have the two maidens weaving, who seem to be day and night. We then have description of the skamba being born throughout the world, and then it switches over to discussing the ancient goddess of morn, looking around, and being like paired with this great Skaman Brahman, like his other half in a sense, because it says, when he is near, she leaves him not. She sees him not, though he is near. Behold the wisdom of the god. He hath not died, he grows not old. It's fascinating. Yeah, I'm wondering if this is mystical material that mirrors anything that we see in the Finnish material, with, of course, the ancient goddess Lauhi, and then her daughter, who is more the goddess of the rainbow. The goddess of the rainbow then could be this younger, connected goddess who is the one who weaves, and could be connected to the goddess of the morn, such as Ushas of the Vedas. But there's this curious flowing together of these goddesses here. You have day and night goddesses weaving, and then you have the goddess of the morn not leaving the Skamba god, the absolute. And so this brings to mind this sort of open question of whether we have the Cailleach, who of course is often one-eyed. That's interesting. In this passage, the goddess of the morn is like closing one eye, I guess, and looking around. So that could just be symbolic. But nonetheless, we have the hag goddess, the Cailleach, and then we have Brigid, and they are kind of opposed goddesses in, I think, Scottish material mainly. Brigid is coming to try to marry the Cailleach's son, Angus, and sort of to take over. And the Cailleach is resisting and, trying to keep things under her power during the time of winter. And ultimately, she's defeated, and Brigid takes over. Brigid is the dawn goddess then. So there's this switching back and forth of the Cailleach and Brigid. So there is this open question of whether Brigid and the Cailleach are like two sides of one great goddess, one higher goddess concept, that are flowing together in that story type, where the young maiden is really the other side of the ancient hag, and so that she is really, she's really the hag, the Cailleach in winter, and then she's kind of taken over by her by the young goddess aspect in the spring and the other half of the year. And I'm always skeptical of these like concepts. They sound like late conflating ideas where it's just sort of simplifying the picture and then saying, oh, they're just two sides of one goddess. But material like this from the Skamba make me rethink that, since we have the goddess of morn here tied directly to the Skamba and being called the Ancient One. So the goddess of morn, who is Ushas seemingly, is this Ancient One who's closing one eye and looking around, and she's the one who is never leaving the side of the Skamba, the absolute deity. So that's fascinating. It's just a big question. It's a big question mark that there isn't enough material to really say for sure. This also brings full circle, brings the issue full circle to the sort of the same question with Freya and Frigg, because it's the same exact pairing. If Frigg is really Frau Halla, or Frau Halla is really an aspect of, or another name of Frigg, of course. And then if Freya is really Ushas, the dawn goddess, just as she parallels Brigid, there's this eternal question of whether Frigg and Freya were really like esoterically one and the same originally, or had any connection originally, or two aspects of a higher concept. And once again, I've always been extremely skeptical of that. There doesn't seem to be enough direct actual evidence of that. It seems like a leap to say that they were. But what if there's evidence of a flowing together even in Vedic material? That would be something to consider. And what if it's there kind of being suggested in the Scottish material? So kind of have to put those all side by side and debate about that. But yeah, take a look at Atharva Veda 10.8 for yourself and see what you think of that passage about the goddess of morn. She's there right along with the two maidens who are weaving. And does that parallel in a simplified form the goddess of the rainbow, the daughter of the rainbow, who is weaving and who is there along with Lauhi? So is that a similar duality of the young maiden connected to, more concepts of the rainbow is connected to sunlight and things like that, and youth and being the weaver herself. We can then, if you can keep these complicated issues in mind, we can look at what I think is interesting is Plato's Republic. So if anyone knows where I'm going with this, there's a very strange coincidental thing in Plato's Republic itself. So here we go. Where is it though? Okay. All right, is that showing up? Okay, so at the very end of, or towards the very end of Plato's Republic, he discusses the famous myth of Er, and it's this mystical kind of theoretical vision of how things work and how rebirth works, used as sort of a teaching tool. But within this little story, he describes the goddess Ananke, and Ananke is the goddess who controls the fate, who is rather like above the fates. She's like the fate of the fates. Okay. And her name translates as necessity, of course, right? So, and okay. So, but what's, you could say you don't like Plato or whatever. It's not really relevant to this, what I'm saying here, which is, where does this story come from that Plato just happens to have, and the details that this story just happens to have? So he could be relating a story within his folk tradition and using it for his own philosophical ends. But why does he have these specific details, which happen to parallel what we've just been looking at? So what they come across in this story is Ananke, and she is resting upon the cosmic pillar, essentially, and she has the three fates with her, who are, I think they're portrayed as her daughters. We'll have to look at that. But nonetheless, yeah, her daughters of necessity, yes. And they are there on the cosmic pillar, and it is her daughters that are weaving, just as the daughter, the maiden of the rainbow, is there the daughter of Lauhi, and she's there with Lauhi, and the daughter is the one weaving. Lauhi is sitting back as sort of the owner of the cosmic pillar item, which is the Sampo. Here we have necessity, Ananke, as the mother, who is like the one in charge here upon the cosmic pillar, and her daughters are with her. They are the fates, and they are weaving with their distaff like hanging from the cosmic pillar directly. So let's read this passage. And even the pillar is described as resembling a rainbow, which, again, the maiden of the rainbow is sitting upon the peak of the rainbow. So, okay. So now when the spirits which were in the meadow had tarried 7 days, on the 8th they were obliged to proceed on their journey. And on the 4th day after, he said that they came to a place where they could see from above a line of light, straight as a column, extending right through the whole heaven and through the earth, in color resembling the rainbow, only brighter and purer. Another day's journey brought them to the place, and there in the midst of the light they saw the ends of the chains of heaven let down from above, for this light is the belt of heaven. and holds together the circle of the universe, like the undergirders of a trireme. So again, what's going on here is holding up the whole vault of the universe, in a sense. The skamba of heaven in the Vedas upholds the vault of the sky and of all existence, of course. So very similar what it's doing here. From these ends is extended the spindle of necessity, or Ananke, this mother of the fates, on which all the revolutions turn. The shaft and hook of this spindle are made of steel, and the whirl is made partly of steel and also partly of other materials. Now the whirl is in form like the whirl used on earth, and the description of it implied that there is one large hollow whirl which is quite scooped out, and into this is fitted another lesser one, and another, and four others, making 8 in all, like vessels which fit into one another. The whirls show their edges on the upper side, etc. This is pierced by the spindle, which is driven home through the center of the 8th. The first and outermost whirl has the rim broadest, and there are 7 inner whirls. So there are all these. He's describing like cosmic spheres in a way, circles within circles, going around this cosmic pillar, right? The largest or fixed stars is spangled, and then you have the sun, you have the moon, you have the light, and the planets. Okay, so being held together are all the planets and the sun and moon. That again is what the skamba, of course, does very clearly, holds up the sun and the moon and all the worlds. Now the whole spindle has the same motion, but as the whole revolves in one direction, the 7 inner circles move slowly in the other, etc., etc. Then it says, the spindle turns on the knees of necessity, and on the upper surface of each circle is a siren, who goes round with them, hymning a single tone or note. The 8 together form one harmony, and round about at equal intervals there is another band, 3 in number, each sitting upon her throne. These are the Fates, daughters of necessity, who are clothed in white robes and have chaplets upon their heads, Lachesis and Clotho and Atropos, who accompany with their voices the harmony of the sirens. Lachesis singing of the past, Clotho of the present, Atropos of the future. Clotho from time to time assisting with a touch of her right hand the revolution of the outer circle of the whirl or spindle, and Atropos with her left hand touching and guiding the inner one, and Lachesis laying hold of either in turn, first with one hand and then with the other. When and the spirits arrived, their duty was to go at once to Lachesis, but first of all there came a prophet who arranged them in order, and he took from the knees of Lachesis lots and samples of lives, and having mounted a high pulpit, spoke as follows. Hear the word of Lachesis, the daughter of necessity. Mortal souls behold a new cycle of life and mortality, etc., etc. Okay, so that is the main image right there, which is you have a line of light, straight as a column, extending right through the whole heaven and through earth, resembling a rainbow but brighter, and from it all of these things hang, including holding up the vault of the universe and having the circle, the whirls, like the celestial spheres kind of spinning around it. And necessity is holding the spindle between her knees, but the daughters are kind of each reaching their hand in and spinning the whirls that come from that, and singing and doing other aspects of making the whole machine spin and work. Okay, so I think this is fascinating. I think you have to ask where Plato got this story, and why does it have these features that can be aligned with our other examples, specifically Lauhi, the hag, the more aged, the more ancient one, as the mother, who then has a daughter who is doing the spinning from the peak of a rainbow. And of course, Lauhi has under her control on her, in her mountain cave, essentially, where she keeps it, the Sampo, which is the magic mill connected to the world pillar word that was borrowed there, right? It's very coincidental. And what is fascinating about this is that previously I have argued that the Cailleach, so again, we see direct lines to the Cailleach because Lauhi is the one who brings winter, brings the frost, births frost, and she is sort of fearful and connected to wolves, things like that. Um, oh, one moment, please. I'll be right back. Okay, and so yeah, I think it's, to me, when I see this, you can't write it off as Plato just made this up, and it just happens to have this same set of concepts, right? And it's very coincidental. But with the Cailleach, if you align the Cailleach with, of course, Lauhi, as this hag who brings winter and has these other features, what's fascinating is that I originally, my original sort of like comparison was that the Cailleach parallels mythically Erd from Norse mythology, and Erd is like one of the Norns, of course, and the Norns are the goddesses of, or the divine beings of fate, the Fate sisters of the Norse. The Cailleach parallels Erd because we have the story of Fionn McCool, and he encounters Milucrad. I don't know how to pronounce that, but Milucradh. And Milucrad, she is at a lake. This lake is called. It's a real lake in Ireland, where this is set, and it is now called the Lake of Cailleach, the Lake of the Cailleach Bera. And so Milucrad is interpreted in the tradition as the Cailleach herself in maiden form. So once again, it's this concept of the hag who can also become a maiden, and the Norns can also do this, seemingly. But Milucrad, she tests Fionn McCool. She asks him to retrieve a ring from the waters of the lake, the icy waters. He swims the lake 3 times and retrieves the ring. When he comes out of the lake, his hair has been turned white, and he's been aged to look like an old man, essentially. He then has to drink a magical cup as given to him, and this restores his health and youth, except for his hair remains white in this story. And then he is told to, he drops the cup in the ground, and from this magical cup grows a magical tree by the side of this lake. And he then is told to meditate, essentially, or sorry, not meditate. He's told to fast. He's told to sit and fast under this tree that has sprung up. And if he fasts, he will receive the power of prophecy, and he'll be able to foresee the future. So I've shown and argued that this is the one and only. Well, okay, it's there are other complications, but this is the clearest parallel to Odin hanging from the tree of Yggdrasil, because the runes that Odin receives, he pulls them out of the waters below him, which are the waters of Erd's well. Erd's well is described elsewhere as turning all things white. The waters of the well are used by the Norns to put upon the base of Yggdrasil to turn the outside of Yggdrasil white from its waters, actually, because it has these whitening waters. And Odin specifically fasts while he hangs on the tree, and when he reaches and gains the runes that he reaches down and gains, they are actually used. They are the items that are used in prophetic acts. And so they have a broad, they can be used, in magical applications, but prophecy is what you see them used in multiple cases. Especially, there are descriptions of sort of lots being cast with rune-like items. So they are very directly prophetic items, connected with the Galders and different prophetic practices. So in any case, you can read about a more full description of that argument in my article on the topic. But the point is, you have this concept of sort of fasting under a tree to gain a mystical power, which is connected to prophecy, and also reaching into waters to gain to pull out some aspect of this. Odin has to drink a drink after coming off of the tree. He drinks from Odrerir rather, which is handed to him, similar to Finn is handed this drink at this point. And the waters that are here they turn all things white. In the Norse story, it's the well of Erd that the waters are from. In the Irish story, it is the lake of the Cailleach, a hag goddess. Therefore, the Cailleach, who appears to be here as the maiden Milukrad, the Cailleach is directly paralleling the fate goddess Erd there. Very interesting. So that's just one piece of evidence. It doesn't mean anything definitively, but it means that this is sort of the strongest mythical parallel that you can kind of put together for the Cailleach. The other one being that Frau Holla creates the snow of winter when she shakes out her bed, and that's similar to the Cailleach shaking out her cloak to make winter. So you have these different lines of connection that you can make. One to Frau Holla and the other to Erd. Furthermore, of course, the Cailleach is the keeper of a well in especially Scottish material. And of course, Erd's well, they are the keeper of a well. So she's strongly connected to wells elsewhere. She's also connected to a whirlpool in, I think it's Corrivrecken is the name. The Scottish Cailleach is known to wash her cloak in a whirlpool that exists in, I think, off the coast of Scotland, and it is called, Corrivrecken, and it is, if you just Google that, if you Wikipedia that, you can read about it. And she washes her cloak there, and so she's referred to as the hag of the whirlpool, essentially, I think is like one of her names. And in other tales, she's called the hag of the mill, and that is even in the Conception of Mongan. She appears there under the name the hag of the mill, very very explicitly. That's her name there. She's the Cailleach of the mill, essentially. Okay. And then well, there's more that can be. Maybe I'll go into more this other point later. But if you set those points out, you have the Cailleach curiously paralleling Erd in at least one major narrative parallel, with the waters of her lake turning things white in this mystical narrative, similar to the well of Erd. You then have, by this more complicated route, you have Ananke, who is the mother of the Fates, holding the staff, holding the spindle rather from the pillar, the cosmic pillar that the Fates then weave with. She is Ananke, the mother, the Fate. She's the controller of the Fates. She's the Fate above the Fates, in a way. And that Ananke then parallels is in a similar position to Lauhi, the creator of winter, who parallels the Cailleach in other ways. Okay, so you can put these lines together and think about them, consider them. Frigg's spindle. Well, 100%. Yeah, I should. There are so many things, I am going to forget as I go along, but that's exactly right. Frigg has a spindle herself. There are even versions of Frau Holla where she's called Spindle Holla. I mean, this is a real title of Frau Holla. She's she's either Spindle Holla or Spilla Holla. There's different versions. Yeah, you can just Wikipedia that as well. I recommend looking at Spindleholla. She's connected to weaving, even as Frau Holla. This is one thing that strongly connects Frigg and Frau Holla together. So, yeah, I'm not saying Frigg and Urd are one and the same, but there could be some esoteric connection there. Worth considering, at least on the deeper, like Proto-Indo-European concept level. And at very least, you can draw a line to both of them between the Cailleach and them. So the other interesting thing here I want to get to, I have to go in about 10 minutes or less, but we then have, the hag of the mill is the Cailleach, and she's the hag of the whirlpool. You have to then look at the magic mill of the Norse mythology, which someone, I think James Fields mentioned, is the mill of Grota, from Grotasonger. Okay. And Grotasonger is part of the Poetic Edda, and as far as I remember, yeah, it must be. And it tells the story of two giantesses, and they are forced to grind. They're forced to grind at this mill of Frodi. There's a couple different owners of the mill within the story. It's complicated, but in any case, they are these two giantesses that are forced to turn this mill, and the mill grinds out. It's always been compared to the Sampo already for one thing, right? So let's see. I'm trying to remember the exact substances it grinds, if anyone can remember. So, okay. Missing took Groti as well. So Groti is the name of the mill, and asked them to grind salt. At midnight, they asked Missing if he did not have salt enough. He asked them to grind more. Frodi had Fenja and Menja, the giantesses, tied to the mill and asked them to grind gold, peace, and happiness. So just like the Sampo grinds these the Sampo essentially grinds gold and salt and grain, I think. So like the three levels of symbolic of all the produce of the world, essentially. Just so the mill of Groti, the Groti mill, grinds gold and salt, but it also can grind peace and happiness. So these abstract, wonderful, wondrous things. It's a wonderful magical mill. It can create anything, even abstract concepts. Okay, and ultimately, the giantesses are overworked essentially and forced to grind, and finally, Missing makes them grind more salt, and this causes everything to kind of I think, let's see, are they on a ship at that point? In any case, there's a big disaster where I think the whole mill sinks. Yeah, okay. So a giant whirlpool, the Maelstrom, meaning mill stream, which is fascinating, was formed as the sea started rushing through the center of the millstone. Then the sea began to turn to salt. So this is what made the sea become salty in the myth. And many people have connected the Sampo to the mill of Groti because, again, the Sampo grinds or produces gold, grain, and salt, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it's like three things like that. And what happens in the conclusion of the Kalevala, in the climax rather, is that the divine heroes have successfully stolen away the Sampo, and I think Lauhi and all her people, all her what have you, the residents of her place, Puyola rather, are asleep or undisturbed somehow, and they are sailing away with the Sampo in the ocean. And someone, I can't remember who, you guys probably know this story better, but one of them begins to sing in celebration, I think. Begins to sing, and they're like, "No, don't sing." And the singing wakes up Lauhi, and Lauhi turns into a bird, flies after them, and grabs the Sampo from the ships that are sailing away. But they attack her, and you know, I think they kill her, or in one way or another, they cause her to drop the Sampo into the ocean, and it breaks apart in the ocean, etc. Sinks down. But the fragments of the Sampo that somehow are then used have magical power even thereafter, and it's this incredible thing. It's very similar to this ultimate destruction of Groti's mill, which has very similar powers, where it breaks apart in the ocean, right? And its potency, its power disperses into the world, making the ocean turn to salt and all of that sort of thing. So it seems like it could easily come from a shared root, or at least have the traditions had exchanged parts of their stories or what have you. Yeah, and or that they were just working from similar stories, right? Um, so yeah, you then have the Cailleach is called the Hag of the Mill. So that's what's fascinating. And you have the Cailleach is called the Hag of the Whirlpool in the ocean. The whirlpool is what's created by the breaking apart of the mill in Groti's song. So you have all these connections, these potential connections. Um, and 1 second, I'll be right back. So yeah, I'll kind of just leave it there, and you guys can look into those things if you find that interesting. Yeah, Corey Vrecken, exactly. Corey Vrecken is the whirlpool, and yeah. So fascinatingly, the Cailleach is often portrayed as having one eye, which is an Odinic thing. It is also within the Celtic tradition. It is a Gaul slash Fintan thing. So it is the Rudra type god, just like Odin is in the Celtic world. But then you have the Cailleach appearing as often one-eyed. She also seems to be connected to deer, and which is like an Artemis kind of thing. Fascinatingly, Artemis being like the female Rudra. Um, okay, where can I find this? So yeah, this is from, let's see. It says, a hag-like figure appears in many legends from the insular Celtic lands. She was guardian of the wildwoods and its animal life, an Artemis-like figure who may ultimately derive from a separate aged goddess conflated with the weather witch Cailleach. This figure, called the Hag of the Hair or the Hag of the Long Teeth, was said to punish hunters who killed pregnant animals, choking them to death with her hair. She was often accompanied by a monstrous cat. That's an interesting detail, connecting to Norse goddesses with cats, right? In a story told in Scotland, the Cailleach befriended a hunter, permitting him to see which deer she struck in her herd and thus marking it as prey. So, anyways, the question of whether that's a conflation or not, I think is speculative, whether that it could be a conflation or not. And yeah. Cailleach commands storms, as noted. They both shapeshift into birds. That's another interesting one. So the Cailleach turns into a heron, while Lauhi turns into the Coco eagle when she steals the Sampo. Neither one is solely good or evil, really. They are ambivalent, and they're both these primordial goddess figures. The Cailleach is connected to pillar stones also, which is interesting. Especially when she's connected to the Goen Sur, the smith. But in any case, she does have her throne, for example, is the highest mountain in Scotland, Ben Nevis. So the highest peak has Axis Mundi connections. She is potentially said to have built some of the round towers of Ireland and to have dropped there are various standing stones around the land which are said to have been dropped from her apron. Therefore, she has connections to certain large stones, which can be symbolic of Axis Mundi, of cosmic pillar symbolism. Um, yeah, these are just possibilities. And then Adrastea, who is equated with Ananke, is also associated with or equated with Artemis in some attestations. And so, yeah, there are these possible lines you can draw. Saiv, who is the more clear Parvati and spouse of Fionn, also turns into a deer. And then Irnan, who we've connected to Kali mythologically before, she actually is called, she and her sisters are called Cailleach, like plural of Cailleach, in her story, so that she falls within the category of the Cailleachs. So, okay, all right. So think about that. See what you can make of that and whether that makes any sense. We also have Kronos, the time god, who is paired with Ananke in the creation, in the esoteric Orphic creation. So Ananke is paired as the other half of Kronos, who is time. Kala is the other name of Rudra, paired with Kali in Vedic material. So is Kala and Kali a similar pairing to Kronos and Ananke? That's my big question that's sort of hanging there. Okay, I got to run, and thanks for hanging out and listening to these connections. And hopefully in the future, they can be sort of put in a more clear, linear argument. But I'd like to hear from you guys. So thanks for being here, and have a good one.